David Ignatius, recent op-ed for the Washington Post, you wrote this about how Americans can break our bitter impasse. You write in part, it's cheering this Christmas week to repeat the bromine, love thy neighbor. But the unfortunate truth about America these days is that many of us seem to hate our neighbors. We don't understand how other people can oppose the values we cherish most. Their behavior is infuriating and it often seems unforgivable. If we're lucky, we escape this blockage and reset the terms, not conceding our old grievances, but putting them aside. What a nice thought, actually putting grievance aside. But does it work in politics when each side's narrative becomes inflamed and reinforced by partisan politicians and media commentators? And is reconciliation possible or even desirable when fundamental matters of principle seem to be at stake? More and more, I hear people expressing doubt about compromise and reconciliation in the age of Trump. That's part of what makes politics so potent and dangerous. It's not the art of the deal, it turns out, but a fight to the death. Thankfully, even amid our current difficulties, America doesn't feel to me like a country headed toward a second civil war. Turn off the television. Amen. Go to a ball game. Listen to some music, and the din from Washington fades. This season, I'd bet that a version of Love Thy Neighbor is a political winner, as angry as people are. Few like the state of our politics, and most Americans want a way out. David, truer words never written, and certainly when it comes to American politics, you know, Meek and I, through the years, probably have given hundreds and hundreds of talks at colleges, Rotary clubs, book events. Wherever we go, we say the same thing. People laugh. I mean, whether it's Demopolis, Alabama, or the Upper West Side, whether it's 92nd Street Y, or, you know, someplace in Iowa, in Middle America, people are so tired of the infighting. And that's not me being Pollyannish. That's my political antenna going up. That if you can prove to Americans that you're strong and you're powerful and you're not just looking, you have a powerful personality and you're not just looking for the mushy middle, that you want, like, you know, Reagan, like LBJ, like FDR, you're strong enough to bring people together and sort of force a political peace upon them. They want that sort of leader that's going to bring America together again.
Well, Joe, I found myself in this Christmas week trying to think differently about politics. As I wrote in this column, I've written dozens this year about our political impasse, the dark days that lie ahead for America, all the things that we worry about, we talk about most mornings, and tried to think, is there a different way to look at these issues? And obviously, if you're a Christian, your faith tells you that you need to begin with the Sermon on the Mount, those words that are so hard to accept, really. They're so radical. Like, you ought to not just, love your friends, you ought to love your enemies, too. You ought to reach out to the people who you think have wronged you and try somehow to break the impasse with them. So I got thinking about that in our personal lives. I think every one of us knows that there's a truth to that. We get in terrible confrontations with our friends, our relatives, our marital partners, and the only way out of them is to reset and escape that corner into which we backed ourselves. I've been wondering, is there a similar thing that can happen in politics with people who are so angry at each other? Each is so convinced they're right. And I obviously I wouldn't pretend that I came up with an answer, but I did try to think this through, and what you quoted at the end, I do think the person who says, I can reach out and work with others, I want to love my neighbor, in effect, I want to be the candidate who can do that, has a powerful message this year, more than usual. I don't know if is Joe Biden that person. I don't know, but I think it's a message that the public really wants to hear.
You know, Karine, it's so interesting. you've always heard the saying that generals are always fighting the last war. I've always felt that in politics. People look at the results at the election booth, as William F. Buckley wrote in his great manifesto from last week, and are chained to that, believe that becomes the new reality. Donald Trump won by Donald Trump won the election, but he lost the popular vote by a greater total than Nixon and Jimmy Carter and JFK. All three won their elections. It was a strange political race, and yet we seem to tie our political realities all to what happened on that one day in 2016, as if that's the future that we are stuck with in the future. And yet, I disagree with that. I think that was an anomaly. Historical anomaly that people are going to be shaking their heads about 30 years ago. Wait a second. How did that happen? And yet you see a party, my old party. You see a church, my current church, the evangelicals, and you see commentators who support Donald Trump saying the most hateful things because they think that's the future. They think that's in vogue. I saw two things yesterday. I went on Twitter briefly because I knew I was doing this show this morning. So in the afternoon, I went into a darkened corner and said, okay, I'm going to look at this for a minute or two. So like two of the first tweets I saw was a very well-known Donald Trump supporter attacking Jill Biden for giving food to hungry refugees on Christmas Day. And I sat there thinking about the Sermon on the Mount, as David said, and all those wonderful red letters in the Bible, Jesus's words, the story of the Good Samaritan helping a foreigner when his own people wouldn't help him. And I thought, is there a more un-Christ-like tweet on Christmas Day than that? And then I scrolled down, and I saw a sitting member of Congress saying, this is the true reason for the season. And it showed Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton a great harm almost being done to them by falling lights. A really scary moment. And I sat there thinking, these poor fools think that this is the new reality, and they're going to be rewarded for this sort of activity, being that hateful to attack a woman for actually helping poor, hungry refugees on Christmas Day. I mean, obviously, they never read Matthew 25 about, when you give food to the hungry or clothing to the naked or give hope to the hopeless. It's as if you were giving to Jesus himself. And yet, this is the state of politics for many people who follow Donald Trump in 2019.
It is the stake of politics. Exactly, Joe. And if you think about it, Donald Trump is the symptom to your point about this is not, it shouldn't be the norm, right? This is not supposed to be the way the things are going to be in the future. Donald Trump is not the future. And if you look at the last 3 years, Joe, just putting on my political analysis hat, we've seen the change. We've seen how people are tired of this. If you look at how, Democrats won in these red districts, why did they win in these red districts back in 2018 and give over the House to Democrats? Because you had these suburban voters who said, enough is enough. We are tired of this. We are tired of the madness. And they handed over the reins to Democrats in the House. If you think about Louisiana, if you think about Kentucky, the same exact thing. These suburban voters who voted for Donald Trump in 2016 said, enough of this craziness, enough of all of this nastiness that we see from this president. And then you see this coalition of suburban voters, black voters, independents handing the reins back or over to Democrats. So we're seeing a change. This is not supposed to be the norm, and it will not be the norm. And it is devastating to see when you think about evangelicals, when you think about your old party, who are supposed to be the party of rule of law, patriotism, handing that all over to Donald Trump. When you think about evangelicals handing over Christianity, it just doesn't exist anymore. more. It is a very sad time that we're in, but the voters are speaking out in the last 3 years. They're saying enough is enough, and now we're heading into 2020. And so now this is where the big opportunity to make sure that we hold Donald Trump accountable.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.